Do you still feel the ravenous need to consume video games? And you find lots of readily consumable video games, ones with a whole bunch of progression, right? Ones with a bunch of grinding to do and all of that. But perhaps you then, at the end of the day, are like, all right, well, I just deleted 8 hours, but I don't know. I still have an itch left to scratch. Right? That feeling that maybe it wasn't satisfying. Well, there's a new study that came out, and it's actually pretty major. Are we really getting the best out of this hobby? Or are we letting the manipulative practices of publishers and developers capture our time, capture our interest, perhaps turn that into engagement, turn that into money, but in a way where we, the customer, are not really getting as much out of it as perhaps we would have used to in the past? Just playing games is no longer good for well-being, as a previous study had inferred. But equally, they're not inherently harmful to mental health. Now, this is basically, there's two studies. The one that's kind of, I guess, a bit more superseded by this. Not that it literally works like that, but it had a smaller sample size. This new study that we're talking about today is quite a bit more robust.
Yep, and it very interestingly comes directly with data that usually it's impossible to get access to, but they managed to convince a couple of publishers into sharing literal, actual gameplay data and time, so there's no like kind of scuffed self-reporting of time or anything.
Yeah, because the previous one was self-reported.
Yeah, that's one of the major problems you'll have with gaming surveys, is people just kind of say like, I'm pretty sure I played for X this time, but this time there's actually real data behind it.
Yeah,
and
so
this is the kind of data that they have access to in the publishers as well. They know all this, we don't. They're keeping it from us.
Right, this is covering Animal Crossing, New Horizons, Apex, Eve, which I think is interesting, because it's like such a player-driven sandbox game. Yeah. Forza Horizon 4, Gran Turismo Sport, Outriders, and The Crew 2. So the publishers allowed this data to be gathered directly from their games. In total, 40,000 people consented to take part at the outset of this study. Now, their hope is this would give them enough info to basically get a broad picture of general gaming habits without being limited to one game platform or group of players. That said, Professor Szynski did say that there are still some limitations to this study. He said, we need to collect large representative samples, and we need to do it at a platform level. Looking at just 7 games is like looking at 7 foodstuffs, when you know Tesco and the other supermarkets sell thousands of different foods and shoppers fill diverse trolleys. So that is true. It is just for these 7 games, but perhaps these principles can be applied a little bit more. So overall, what they were trying to achieve with this study was to basically establish a causal relationship between well-being, game-playing, and well-being, to try to just work out what's actually going on. And what's interesting is that while they did find a minimal overall relationship to them, actually some things are really important when you dive into the data. Reason for playing is what seems to dictate your levels of satisfaction when you're playing a game. The reasoning, the why. And the why is something that will vary drastically between different types of games. So this is again what Professor Szynski was talking about. We found it really does not matter how much gamers played in terms of their sense of overall well-being. It wasn't the quantity of gaming, but the quality that counted. If they felt they had to play, they felt worse. If they played because they loved it, then the data did not suggest it affected mental health. It seemed to give them a strong positive feeling. So here's a chart, right? This shows 4 models plotting how players respond to different types of motivation during each of the information waves of their survey. And basically it's about, are they intrinsically motivated, which means that the motivation to play the game comes from their own, within their personal desire? Or is it extrinsic, as in they maybe are playing for a reason, playing to grind out something, playing to maybe, playing World of Warcraft and grinding a bunch of stuff to get a little bit more power for your character, even though you feel like it's maybe a chore or a checklist that the developer has put in so that you have a weekly thing you must do.
Yeah, the perfect examples for here, Animal Crossing, you're how can there be extrinsic motivation in there? But then you think, are you playing just to get your debt paid off in-game? Or are you playing because you've got a couple hours to kill and you want to kind of, you've got your own little goal you've set of making your house nice? Or in Apex, are you playing to have fun? Or are you playing to make your win counter go up? Or are you playing for the battle pass? That's the kind of stuff that I assume for these games would all be tracked. Although it is interesting that there's very little difference between the games. That's a real surprise to me.
Yeah, we look at this, we see intrinsic. As intrinsic motivation increases, you can see that trend line.
Yep.
It is positive. All right. Now, maybe, it is interesting, you compare, Gran Turismo Sport to maybe something like Outriders. Does it look slightly differently? Is it a little bit more vertical? Because maybe it's more just about the joy of racing rather than a big, collect all the things.
Yeah, well, that's where you kind of get into the problem of blending intrinsic and extrinsic. Because Outriders is a really good example of that, because it's got that kind of gear building stuff going on, where you can very easily either play, say something like a Diablo, you can play it for the intrinsic reason of, I'm going to, maybe PoE, I'm going to finish this build and give it a try.
Yeah.
So I am, my goal is kind of extrinsic, so I have to go get the gear to make this build. But the overall process, I'm doing it because I want to see how the build plays, and I get that feeling myself. Versus, I'm getting the build together because I don't really want to, but I had it listed on the things I wanted to achieve in gaming this week. Maybe even you wanted to do it yesterday. You don't feel like it today, but you'll do it anyway because you wanted to play it tomorrow or something. And that's the kind of stuff that can be very interesting whenever you think about the game design. But it's whenever you get to stuff like the battle passes and the cosmetic rewards, you get very much into the extrinsic part of things.
Yeah. I'm certainly looking at EVE Online, it's no shit, the graph looks like that. Yep. Being such a sandbox, player social interaction driven game. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of fascinating stuff. It definitely, it puts, to a graph something that I think increasingly more of us are becoming aware of as fatigue of battle passes and all of those extrinsic motivation systems the games have come in. Again, I would like to put this in front of Blizzard Entertainment and say, hey Ian, can we think about that Great Vault again, please there, Buster? Please? Right? Yeah. So it is quite interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing where I was going into this and it was brought up to us by, I can't remember his name now, but it was tweeted at me by someone to look at this, and it's kind of interesting that it's so obvious, right?
Yeah, totally.
This is completely obvious, but now that there's a little bit, and it's not even very much, there's a little bit of science, a little bit of research using a couple games that a couple dozen thousand people are yes, this is it. This is what. Why do we need to wait for science to act on this? But I guess that's kind of the whole problem with things at the minute, where it's you need the scientific backing to make sure. But to everyone who's played games and thought about, because I'm sure, if you're really involved in games, you've probably spent a lot of time. I mean, if you're watching the channel, you almost certainly love video games, or maybe you're really masochistic, I don't know, but you definitely will have felt these different things. I feel worse after playing a game and then likely interrogated that. Because we do that all the time. We kind of interrogate ourselves. Or, I had a really good time playing game that I didn't enjoy last week. Why did I enjoy it this week? And you kind of come to these obvious conclusions. But now it's they're backed up.
Yeah.
This happens at a reasonably large enough level across games that are completely differently designed with both intrinsic and extrinsic motivators baked into the game. Are this is, even when it comes to the all the gamification and loot boxes and stuff, and the UK calling for data and going, we need more data, we need more science. This is the kind of stuff that they want to see. Just a little study that goes, hey, we've proved it. We all knew it, but we've actually proved it now. Now we can actually move on this. So now you can, it is a little bit weak because this isn't a massive study, but you could immediately just go, send an email to EA and go, hey, extrinsic motivators in your game are detrimental to the well-being of your players. That's not a good long-term strategy. Also, if it's detrimental to the well-being of your players, then one might consider that immoral.
Wow, what a surprise. Now, here's why EA will say, yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
So, how do you monetize intrinsic motivation? Well, that's called someone buying your game because it looks cool to them. Yeah. Or maybe somebody continuing their subscription for your MMORPG because they're enjoying their experience within that. Mm-hmm. How do you monetize extrinsic motivation? You set up a battle pass.
There are dozens of books written on the subject.
Yeah, you set up a battle pass. You offer tier skips. You do loot boxes that can be earned via normal play, but also can just be straight up purchased. You do the things that the free-to-play live services do, and in some cases, the pay-to-play live services as well. Right? So, if you're thinking wow, according to this graph, those types of games are less overall less satisfying to people. Yeah, but they're also far, far more monetizable.
Yep.
And that's the way the cookie crumbles. So overall then, this just provides some good evidence that the motivational quality of video gameplay is reliably linked to the player's well-being, right? So it's less about playing games, it is more about your reason for doing it. And I think that's kind of interesting. Again, you think about reading books. If you're reading books because you love fantasy novels and you want to go through, is it the Mistwalker series or what was it? The Brandon Sanderson one, right?
Yeah.
Then you're just going to be like, oh, great, I'm having fun. But if for some reason you're extrinsically motivated to read those books, you just set yourself a goal of reading a book every 2 days, well, again, you can see how that would map on to these graphs. Yeah. So it applies for a book, it applies for a video game. Just that with a video game, because they're so much more engaging, on the intrinsic motivation side, developers can be significantly more manipulative.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, play games because you want to. Don't play them because you feel you have to. That's basically it. When a game has daily quests, fuck that noise.
100,000%. Obviously, I was immediately talking about like the industry side of this to see the wider change. But I mean, change starts at home. So
yeah,
take this like personally, where here's a little bit of thing. If you feel bad about your video games, play them because you want to.
Now, to be clear,
and then obviously interrogate that and stuff. But yeah,
when I say a daily quest, I'm thinking less like a daily quest in a World of Warcraft as it was a few years ago.
Yeah,
I'm thinking more about those like daily challenge things that are just to get you some currency that you can then ideally spend in the company store, or of course just buy some COD points or buy some whatever points, some Halo points, some Spartan points. That's kind of what I mean, because like a daily quest, maybe back in the day, you do your dailies for a few days and then you get a new story quest and then you get another bunch of whatever. Like, it was a bit more reasonable. Whereas now, the daily quest is no longer a quest. The daily quest is more like a daily to-do list. And I know that a lot of people would say that they were that in the past, and I mean, to a degree, they totally were. But I feel like there was some form of distinction for the Hearthstone style of a daily quest.
Yeah, well, it's the balance, right?
Yeah.
It's the way I was saying, you can have extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivators overlap with each other. Because you can do something that is designed to be an extrinsic motivator to say, oh, here's a task list. But you can do that because you want the feeling of joy of finishing the task. Or you want you want to, say, have a fun experience with the reward at the end. And that's why like gameplay rewards and like the idea of pride in your accomplishment, where a challenge that gets you a currency that you can then spend in the store in place of real money, or just grind it out or whatever, that's different to like say the golden weapons in Call of Duty, because they were like, there was the intrinsic joy of, I have completed this task, I have completed this challenge it was a little bit of work, sure, but I have a reward that I'm going to feel good showing off. And because gaming was a little bit more intrinsic back in those days, like as an overall whole, because of how motivation and stuff has been designed, and how I guess basically the entire world has moved into more extrinsic motivators to try and get people's attention, that it was like there was more blended into the intrinsic. And there was also like, whenever there were daily quests, they still pretended to be quests, right? In World of Warcraft, the daily quest was a quest. Whereas it might have been the same thing every day, or it might have been like 5 that rotated over a week, but it would still be like, here's a thing to do in the world, as opposed to today's design, which is very much, you can see the system layer first in like every game. And the challenges aren't challenges because they're over there. They're not like, get 10 headshots with this gun. They're just like, get a couple kills in the game. And it's easy to get, but it's a little bing bing in the corner, as opposed to something that's like actually designed as a challenge, designed to be there. It's like the smoke and mirrors used to be there. Now they're just kind of up front. Now it says on the menu, this is an extrinsic motivator designed for you to play this whenever here's some reason for you to log into our game even when you don't feel like it. As opposed to, here's something to do when you feel like playing. And that's kind of the ultimate difference. That's worth thinking about, because I know I've certainly had a marked increase in well-being ever since thinking about this and learning to recognize extrinsic motivation for playing a game, and then going, no, I'm going to do something else that's extrinsically motivated, or do something that's intrinsically motivated otherwise. And then whenever the incredible need to play a video game actually takes me, like a video game called Mini Healer that I'm going to talk about in another video.
Oh yes.
But it is just like when that hits, it feels good. You're there, you're enjoying it, even if it is like a loot loop or something. As long as you stay in the driver's seat, it feels good. As soon as you hand the controller over of your own brain to the publisher or the developer, that's when there must be some part of your soul that goes, you're not in the seat.
Definitely.
There must be.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like.
Oh, there's something within you that knows.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a slow but ever increasing void.
Yeah.
It just grows the more that you do that.
Yeah, the voice inside screams louder and louder.
Yeah, that's what I found. So, look, this is something that may call into question some of your own game playing habits. I think it's certainly at different points. It's done that to both me and Matt. Yep. But that's actually okay, because a lot of the stuff here that is bad, that leads to bad experiences, that's actually the sort of things that we generally do consider make games worse.
The fast food of video games, really.
Yeah, like, there's definitely a discussion to be had about the sort of compulsion of mega grindy ARPGs. Yeah. But within so many games that have got the battle passes yoinked in and all just that bullshit, all that frustrating stuff, this is putting data to the bad feelings that I think a lot of us know we have when we're confronted by those things. And I think that's good. It's good to be armed with data. It's good to see the science advance. We obviously need to see more. We need to see this for more games. But overall, I think this is just a really big win. And I think it also serves as a reminder that perhaps instead of just serving up our soul to the one game that we just grind through for extrinsic reasons, perhaps it's going to be worth at some point putting in the time and the effort, because it does take time and effort to do the things that are more intrinsically motivated. It might take you a while to actually go on the hunt for that indie game that maybe you'd love to play, or maybe that older game from a big publisher that you missed out on, but apparently it's great. But I think this shows that actually doing that is literally worth it to your well-being. And I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah, because why play games if they're not making your life better?
That's it. That's it. They have to be better than just passing time.
Yep. Otherwise, if you can get better benefit by sitting quietly in a room, I mean, what's the point? What's the point of spending your money or your attention?
So look, there you have it. I guess, how did this impact you? Have you felt this within your own game playing habits? Just let us know. Let us know. There's so many stories out there that, even though they may be anecdotal, they're still meaningful. So do let us know. That's it for us. See you next time.